What's up guys, Pretender here, back with another Honkai Star guide. Today I'm here with the should you summon for one of the characters that will be rerunning in the 3.4 first half, being Tribbie, Sunday, and Sparkle. So the way this video is going to go is first I'll be talking about each of them broken up into different parts, talking about what the role and especially what their role in the current meta is, early investment stuff if that's also good as well, how well they're faring up, and so on. After I go through all three of them, then I'll be having another 3 sections where I talk about if you should pull for them individually. All of this is time coded, so if you have a certain character you want to listen to only, you can go ahead and skip to it. With that being said, if you do find this video helpful, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for more videos like this. Check the description to join the Discord, and let's get straight into the video. So the first character we're going to talk about is Tribbie. Tribbie is the most recent out of the 3, who did release in 3.1, and she's getting a rerun 3 patches later. And even 3 patches later, her chokehold on the meta has not gone down, it's just gotten stronger. Tribbie is practically tied for the best Harmony character in the game. Everything she provides does practically benefit any character. There's really only 2 teams that you don't want to put her on. One of them is any form of dot, and the other one is break that isn't Boot Hill, because Boot Hill actually can have teams that use Tribbie. For Wrap and Firefly though, usually you would avoid it. Any other team though, Tribbie is practically the best in slot to run. She's able to give the entire team buffs from all type res pen, being able to activate a zone that makes enemies take 30% damage for just entering it, being able to deal additional quantum damage based off Tribbie's max HP, and also the insane part is Tribbie is also a sub DPS at the same time, as she does have access to a full AoE follow-up attack that is launched anytime someone does use an ultimate. Especially since it stacks up, maybe the first 1 or 2 won't do too much, but once you're 3 and so on, it's going to do a lot of damage because Tribbie's buffs also benefit herself. If you have anyone else buffing her even more, then her damage can do even more. So you take a character that has insanely universal buffs, is a great slot in on sustainless, is a best in slot on a lot of strong teams, Aglia, Castris, a Nox Hyper Carry, the Herda, and so on, and you also give her sub DPS capabilities. She really does just do everything, besides sustain, but that's besides the point. On top of that, she has insanely good early investment. Her E1 is definitely the current best E1 in the game, giving the actual zone a access to true damage now. So with the power of her E1, when you do have her ultimate zone active, the damage your allies do deal will also have an additional true damage equal to 24% of the total damage to that attack dealt to targets that have also been dealt additional damage by the zone, which is, anyone in the zone. So you take all those insane buffs and you add true damage on top of that. So if you already have a really hard hitting DPS, such as, Facial, again, the Herda, if you hit, let's say 500k on a single target, you're going to be dealing 24% extra as true damage, which significantly impacts the amount of total damage you can do. And remember, this does impact your entire team, so if you have a sub DPS on the team, they will also get the buffs and deal true damage. If you have a sustain that does good damage to this highest scene of Venturian, they will also get those buffs and do good damage. Tribbie herself is getting that true damage as well, so she can even do more damage. That E1 is just no joke. I did say she is one of, if not the best, Harmony characters in the game. With her E1, far and none the best one in the game. Tribbie also is one of the best holders of one of the most strongest light cones in the game, being S5 DDD specifically. So this helps a lot of teams, especially if you're hitting certain breakpoints such as 3 turns within a cycle, getting to attack faster. She's able to do that a lot, especially with how much you do use her ultimate. So she's also a character where you don't actually need her light cone specifically, as she has such a strong option available to her that she does utilize well. That's not saying that her signature light cone is bad by any means. Her signature light cone is equally as insane, giving her a crit damage stat stick to make her do more damage, also being able to regenerate more energy after the word does launch a follow-up attack, which straight up allows her to ditch the energy regen rope and run HP rope, which makes her do significantly more damage. And on top of that, buffs your entire team's crit damage by 48% when she does have the Presage buff. And when she does enter battle, she immediately gains 21 energy, practically letting you set up right away. All these insane buffs, all these insane early investments, E1, S1, she is definitely one of the top characters in the game. That gets further amplified with early investment to this day. Next up, we do have the man himself, Sunday. Sunday was released in the middle between Tribbie and Sparkle, and was next up in the Action Advanced Harmony support that, gives crit damage and such. And he practically did end up overshadowing any team that Bronya and Sparkle was on, which still remains true except for one case that I will get into when I start talking about Sparkle. So as I mentioned, Sunday's role is a Harmony support to buff, damage dealt, crit damage, and also gives a big 20% crit rate, which is insane, by the way. That lets you allocate, more attack, more crit damage, or more HP, whatever you're doing, whatever DPS you're trying to support. He was designed to excel with characters that do have a Memo Sprite, We don't really have a case where that's too significant right now because Aglia is the main one that absolutely loves to have Sunday. She becomes a god tier character with Sunday. It's insane. She's also fantastic with someone like Jingwan. Jingwan is still able to clear stuff thanks to Sunday to this day. But any team, again, pretty much that you're running Bronya, Sparkle on and so on an Akron team, on a Boot Hill team, any one of those teams, Sunday ended up being the replacement for them as he just did their role but better. He gave the perfect amount of damage dealt, which did further amplify if the person you are buffing does have a summon. He had a great crit damage buff and also was able to regen energy based off the max HP of the person you are buffing with the ultimate. And as I mentioned, that 20% crit rate he does give with the talent when using skill is insane, as that makes it a lot easier to have a full 100% crit rate DPS in battle, which 100% crit rate is very nice. And then when it did come to his early investment, his E1 is also really good. The full value comes with if the person does have a summon that you are buffing, but it does give the target character a 16% defense ignore, and gives access to that person's summon 40% of the target's defense ignored. That will last for 2 turns, and it's very easy to have full uptime on it as it is based off his skill. So if you are buffing someone like Aglia or Jingwan, the damage you would do comparatively was insane as you're ignoring so much more defense. Unfortunately, characters without summons don't feel it as much as it's just 16%. But it can become very good, especially if you have other forms of defense ignore on that character, such as buffing Anaxa, and you already have defense shred in Anaxa's Lycone, his E1, Anaxa has defense ignore in his kit, if you're running Genius set and so on, as defense ignore gets a lot stronger with defense shred and defense ignore itself. So it still was a valuable dupe. But his biggest value came from his Lycone when it comes to earlier investment. His signature Lycone gives him 6 energy when he is using skill or ultimate on one ally character, which is what he does for both, allowing him to practically have permanent uptime on his ultimate on that DPS you are buffing. On top of that, every time you do use skill or ultimate on one ally character, that person you are buffing gets a 15% increase to damage dealt that stacks up to 3 times, so that's an extra 45% damage dealt you can get for free. And every 2 instances of skill or ultimate, the where it does use, will recover a skill point. Paired with the fact that Sunday already does regenerate a skill point when using his skill on the Beatified, he now also at the same time becomes an SP positive character. Not as front-loaded SP as Sparkle, but actually able to regen more than Sparkle can. So you take this character that has really good buffs, especially with the crit rate buffs, a good ultimate that also gives energy, which is insane to get more ultimates, being able to have permanent uptime thanks to his Lycone especially, and even if you pair a different Lycone that gives energy regen rate, it still does work. With this Lycone also being SP positive, without it neutral, so it still does work. It's not like Bronya where you're actually in the negative territory. Being SP neutral at least and then positive with the Lycone, you were able to absolutely cook with him on a -1 setup, a hyperspeed setup, anywhere again that ran Sparkle or Bronya, he did effectively replace. And still does remain true. There is only one case that again I will talk about in the Sparkle section. But outside of that, Sunday, very, very prominent character. The only places you don't use him on is once again Dot and Break that isn't Boot Hill. Casters also does have some anti-synergy, but that doesn't mean you can't use him with her. He still does work fine enough with her. But the only actual teams that you would not use him on would be Dot and Break that isn't Boot Hill. Otherwise, he is a fantastic unit everywhere else, still to this day. And finally, last up, we do have Sparkle. Sparkle has had it rough, especially with Sunday already, fully replacing her. She still was definitely usable, but the only problem is with Sparkle, you were not able to do a -1 setup, as she is another action forward giving character, but the action forward she gave was by 50%. So it wasn't giving a full turn like Sunday or Bronya, which is why you were not actually able to do a full -1 setup and having that proper setup you could do. Sparkle's crit damage buff is better than Sunday's, and her whole thing was she's able to overcap your skill points by 2 and also be able to recover a lot more front-loaded skill points. Problem is, there really was no character that really needed this besides IL Danheng, and when Sunday did come out, IL Danheng did like using Sunday more. A proper optimized rotation with Sunday did a lot more than Sparkle, so even on the character that she was practically made for was kind of just replaced. She's also able to give damage dealt and such, and also be able to increase attack, which further amplifies for quantum characters, but especially with what recent Harmony characters can do, it really isn't much. You can definitely see that Sparkle was the oldest one made out of these 3 characters. So the main thing was if she was able to at least do a -1 setup, she'd be a lot more valuable, especially since -1 has a lot more output than a hyperspeed build. But with Sparkle, you're forced to run the DPS you want to buff as a base speed character and running Sparkle as a hyperspeed character. And other stuff like external sources such as Eagle setups with, the DPS for Sparkle herself, S5 D to D on the team, having something like RMC proc, if you're running them together, could still mess up with their 50% action forward. So not only was it unable to do a -1 setup, you also had ways to actually mess up the tuning entirely to not actually give the character the full turn. So Sparkle's spot in the meta was definitely not the strongest, and when it comes to her earlier investment with E1 and S1, her E1 isn't really that great. Extends the duration of her ultimate by 1 turn, but she doesn't really need that. She also does increase everyone that does have Cypher's attack by 40%, which is good, but definitely not something that's, Eidolon worthy. And then with her Lycon, it did give you access to get crit rate for your team and more crit damage. On top of that, increasing her own crit damage, which, further amplified her buff. And was also practically a permanent uptime, so it still was good. But a lot of ways, DDD ended up outperforming it still. The benefits you can get from DDD just was better. So yeah, already being replaced pretty hard. In a lot of ways, Bronia setup, especially with E2 Bronia, which is a lot more accessible because she's a standard character, did end up outperforming the teams that Sparkle was on as well. So she really just was designed with, I think not too much thought, and that didn't really help her. I'm not saying she's bad by any means. Like, if you did use her, she still does cook. She still is fine, and you can definitely do a lot of setups, and a lot of DPS still can use her. There's a lot of characters that still can be ran base speed and running a hyper speed Sparkle instead. Like, Acheron still works with that. Mida is really good with it, and so on. Now, the thing I was mentioning before is her research is actually going to be due to the new Fate character, Archer. She is finally going to be best in slot again for a character, and that is going to be for him, as he needs front-loaded SP, as each skill he does use, which is his main source of damage, will proc 2, and he's able to do it repeatedly, so he's able to burn through them fast. So he's going to really want that overcap she does provide, and also the front-loaded SP she can regen. The slower regen, but more overall throughout the battle, does not work with Sunday, and running Archer as a -1 would absolutely kill your skill points and just not work. So the best way to play him is actually base speed with hyperspeed Sparkle. So Sparkle is finally going to be the best in slot for a new DPS. And to top it all off, Archer himself is insanely strong. So that is actually going to jump her value by quite a bit, especially since Archer himself is a free character, and if you do 200 pulls, which is going to be easy for a lot of people, as Finon's going to be in the update, all these 3 strong reruns, and then Fate update, so a lot of people will also end up getting Archer's Lycon. It'd be kind of a waste to get an E0S1 character for practically free for something for other things, and not being able to build it. And the best way to actually have a team for him is getting Sparkle. Sparkle is going to make a world of a difference for him, and is going to make him probably one of the strongest DPS performing when it comes to single target content. And even in AoE based bosses, he still does perform well. But he very, very, very much wants Sparkle. And now, finally talking about the should you summon part. So first, starting it off with Tribbie. Generally, I would never not recommend you to summon for Tribbie. Tribbie should have higher priority than most things you do want to summon for, as she is just insanely strong. At E0, S0, she's insanely strong thanks to the buff she does provide already, and also being a sub DPS at all levels. If you're able to get that E1, that much better. She practically becomes a must pull. If you are able to tell yourself you're able to get that E1, and you're thinking about going for it, go for it. It's going to make a world of a difference. Lycon, you don't have to pick it up as much, but if you're able to, it's going to also be really good. It's also going to very much increase the damage that she can do, and also provide your team a bunch of crit damage, which a lot of her best teams do actually still crit. So that crit damage is going to be very helpful as well. So Tribbie is like the one character, if you don't have, I'd 100% recommend getting her. The literal only way I don't recommend getting her is if you're a strict dot player and your second team is a Rappa/Firefly. If you are strictly using that and you don't have any plans to branch out, or you don't really want to branch out, then you wouldn't really need her, because Dot doesn't want to use her, and Break that isn't Buto doesn't really want to use her either. That is the only specific case that I would not recommend picking up Tribbie. Otherwise, 100% I would recommend picking her up. For Sunday, Sunday is another character I definitely do recommend picking up. I think Tribbie does have overall more value than Sunday, but Sunday is still very, very important. And the value for him further amplifies if you have someone like Aglia, or you still use Jingwan. If you use those two characters, I think he's a must pull. If you have characters that can benefit from, -1 setups, which, is so many characters in this game that have Sunday on his best in slot teams. Saber is actually going to have him on the best in slot team. Finon does as well. Anaxa Hypercarry does. Mide, Aglia. There's even the Herda teams that can use him. Works great with Buto for Break as well. Any team that you may be already using someone like Bronia on it, he would end up being the replacement for that team. So if you're in that case where you do have these hyper carries that would benefit from him, which again is almost everyone, I would also recommend picking him up. If you're able to get his Lycon, that much better. Thankfully, you don't really have to go for his E1. Despite it being good, you really don't need it. E0 S1 is a perfect stopping point. The only reasons I wouldn't summon for him is the same reasons for Tribbie. If you strictly use Dot and you strictly use something like Grapple or Firefly, no plans on branching out, you don't want to, then don't bother. Otherwise, he would be another character I think would be a must-have. And then finally for Sparkle. Sparkle is the one I think has nowhere near as priority as the other two. The only way I do recommend picking her up now is if you do plan on committing to an Archer team. If you do want to commit to the free Archer and you do want him to perform at his best, then I would recommend picking up Sparkle because she will make a world of a difference on that team. And, also just make sure, some other teams might actually benefit from her. As again, I mentioned you could still run her hyperspeed and run other characters like Mide, Acheron, and so on at base speed. If you have other characters that can still benefit from her actual playstyle, that do work as well, then it would be even more beneficial. You'd prioritize it for your Archer, but she would still be able to be used on other teams. So if you're planning on, maining Archer or you want to use them a lot, then I definitely recommend it. If you aren't, but you still have other characters that can benefit from her, then she still has a bit of recommendations from me. But if you already have -1 setups on those teams, maybe you want to use Archer, but you're not going to main him or anything, then I'd recommend skipping Sparkle. As I don't really recommend, picking up a support that's only going to be best installed for one team, unless you plan on heavily using that team now and for a while. So for most people, I recommend skipping Sparkle. You may say, what about buffs? Because she would be one of the characters that probably do get buffed earlier as opposed to others. Obviously, we have no idea when she's going to get buffed. We don't know when the next batch of buffs is going to be, which is why I cannot recommend summoning for her. And when she does inevitably get buffed, she's going to get a rerun then anyway, so you can make your decision then. For now though, just to be playing it safe, your resources would be better allocated elsewhere if you don't fall into the category of wanting to heavily main Archer or use them a lot at least, and also having other characters that would benefit from it. So again, in most cases, I would recommend skipping. And yep, that is the video that is talking about the 3.4 characters and their current spot on the meta, why they're good, early investment and such, and then should you summon reasons for all three of them. Hope you guys found the video helpful. If you did, once again, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for more videos like this. Check the description to join the Discord once again, and I'll see you later. Peace out.